shall begin with Swamiji's tour back to USA from England. He came on 6th of December 95 and began working, that means working in the sense of giving talks from Monday the 9th of December. And it will continue till Christmas holidays. So now, what were the special things in this period? First of all, Swamiji came here, and as you know, we have said that during his absence, both Kripananda and Abhayananda, they were doing their best as they could do. So now Swamiji himself has come and he began things in full vigor. Now it was, you see, seen very soon that the two rooms at the lodging of Swamiji, which was your 228 West 39th Street, that two parlor rooms were necessary for this because the audience was growing. So Kripananda moved to the attic of the building, and he used to, of course, pay for it, £2 a week. And gradually he was also becoming independent in the sense that he was not to come to Swamiji's dining table thinking that he should not be a financial burden to the Swami, and he used to take his food outside. So like that, things are going on. But Swamiji himself, after his arrival, you see, noted that the food was not very clean. So he requested Miss Ellen Waldo whether she could prepare a little food for him. And Miss Waldo very willingly agreed. But this agreeing means a tremendous job for her. She used to leave by horse carriage in those days, 2 hours journey. She used to come from her home at 8 in the morning, used to remain the whole day and evening in the house, and not only cooking, she used to do various things. We shall discuss all these things. And in the evening at 9 or 10, she would return home. And Swamiji said the food is unclean. You know, food has several kinds of impurities. One impurity is your ordinary impurity, which we call normally unclean food. But there is another kind of impurity, which is the nature of the food is such that it is not good for yogis. And the third kind is this, that when the food is prepared by a wrong person, that means the person who is not quite spiritual, the food becomes contaminated. So I think it is because of this third thing that Swamiji asked Miss Waldo, who was very devoted, very intelligent also. She was not only good in ordinary menial jobs, she was one of the persons who understood clearly Swamiji's message and could do a lot in this regard. In fact, she used to work untiringly from morning till night, taking dictations, editing, then meeting visitors, cleaning, all these things she used to do. And that means she was maintaining the household, the whole household, apart from cooking also. So this is a great thing. And as I've said, that Kripananda moved like that, and Kripananda was getting disgusted more and more because of, in his language, the committee of petticoats in his language. So this committee of petticoats who used to manage everything and even used to manage the collections which were received. So this thing was kind of animosity was growing between the committee members and Kripananda, which was estranging Kripananda more and more from the Swami. So, but we must say that Kripananda has done it. Maybe his manners were not very amicable, so that may be one of the reasons. But whatever it was, and if there was in the committee who was really hostile towards him, that we precisely do not know. As far as we can see from the reports of Kripananda and from other sources, it seems that the Monday Swamiji gave an introductory talk regarding religion, yogas, etc., in a general way. Then 11th and 18th December, he discussed Jnana Yoga. 14th and 21st, he discussed, in 13th and 20th, he discussed Karma Yoga. 14th and 21st, he discussed Raja Yoga. And 15th and 22nd, he answered questions put to him. So, and 16th and 23rd of December, he talked on Bhakti Yoga. So, in this short space of time, the four yogas were, Swamiji had talked about these things earlier, but these things were more complete in the sense that the morning classes were for the advanced people and the evening classes were for the beginners. That is how the general pattern was there. Now, apart from this, there was another development which was of great importance for Swamiji. Say, we have discussed that in England, he had a momentous meeting with your sister Nivedita, that means Miss Noble, and she would become, as you know, an ardent disciple and would play a great role in India. He gave her all to India. So this was one thing. This happened during his England tour of 1895, a short tour. But in this short period, there's another thing God sent to him, because his devotees were finding that Swamiji's message by and large was being lost. Because he used to speak at a pace, and it was difficult for stenographers, ordinary stenographers, to put it in shorthand and then transcript it for publishing, because it is not only, it requires two kinds of skills. One is your skill for the steno, another is your general comprehension of philosophical ideas. If you do not, have a little ideas into Indian philosophy, then it is difficult to follow Swamiji and to put it down correctly. We are talking about this coming of J.J. Goodwin in the life of Swami Vivekananda. It was on 12th December 1895 that the committee put up notices in 2 newspapers that they want a shorthand writer. So Goodwin applied and he was employed. And this seemed to be a very great thing. Goodwin was the son of a stenographer in England. He was born in Bath in England. His father also edited and certain newspapers. But in spite of that, the family was poor. So from his childhood, he was poor. Because of his father's profession, he learned also steno from his early adolescence and went to Australia in search of a living. See, he used to do many odd jobs here and there. For example, driving sheep from inland to the coast, per animal 1 shilling. So all these things he tried to do. But this young man was in search of, he used to get some salary from his jobs. It was okay, but he used not to give any love of heart from anyone. See, it was so that famished him. When he came across Swami Vivekananda, it was a big thing for him. For the first time, he knew what love is. And he fell under the spell of Swami Vivekananda. And 2.5 years he would live, you see, more. He would die in India, in Uti, and was like a shadow following Swamiji, day and night serving him, without knowing what tiring is. So all these, much of your message of Swamiji, which you find in the complete works, are due to his labor. He used to take the shorthand and then used to go to the other side of the road to his own room. Immediately in the typewriter he used to do, and then same day he would deliver all those things in message. So this was a tremendous job, and he followed Swamiji in different places in America. He also came with Swamiji to England, and Swamiji brought him also finally to India, where he died prematurely in Uti. See, he loved to play cricket. He was playing cricket in the rain and caught typhoid and passed away at a very early age. So Swamiji said that if I have a mission in life, then Goodwin is a part of it. So a great role he played for 2.5 years in the life of Swamiji. So this Goodwin arrived there in mid-December. So that was a great thing. And Swamiji's messages were not lost, say, for this period. I have said that Miss Waldo took happily the job of cooking for Swamiji, but she did not only cooking, she used to edit, she used to clean, she used to take dictation, and used to, you see, sometimes she used to teach also and manage the whole thing, read proofs and meet visitors. So practically the whole household, he was the much of the job, except for giving up lectures, were on her shoulders. And day and night, with tremendous energy, she used to do it. She was one of the ancestors, is the great philosopher, you see, Emerson. She was also a great favorite of Emerson's lectures. But in Swamiji, he found a fuller message, because Emerson had Vedanta in a very diluted form from different sources. These two things are happening. That means on one side, this is Miss Waldo, called Haridasi. Swamiji named her Haridasi. So this Haridasi was working, and another side, this Goodwin came as a godsend, because he was not just a stenographer. He was following Swamiji like a shadow. Since Goodwin was poor, he used to take a very nominal salary just for his subsistence. So he used to live like that. So for all practical purposes, he led the life of a sannyasi and a very devoted worker. Then we go to your question of the the relation between. So Waldo, you say, it is Devamata writes that one day in the morning, Swami noticed that Miss Waldo was weeping. So he asked, what is the matter? Has anything happened? She was sobbing and said that it seems that I am not able to please you. If anyone else does some mistake, you scold me always. Swamiji immediately said that I do not know these people well. So how can I scold them? And if I cannot scold my own, whom shall I scold? See, this was the answer. So thereupon, she was comforted, say that is, the scolding of Swamiji was a proof of his feeling nearness. So her spirit was smoothened, I should say. Sister Devamata, Miss Blaine, who was again a kind of a saintly person, she had come across Swamiji first in Detroit, and then she was here also in New York. And in those days, the Umata said that she and a friend, and they were very avid seekers of truth. So, you say, morning they will attend a class, say afternoon they would go elsewhere, and in the evening again they would come to Swamiji's class. Like that, they were moving here and there, but very soon they found that Swamiji was far above the other ordinary preachers and teachers. So they became riveted to Swamiji. This Sister Nivedita would pass 2 years with Swami Ramakrishna in Madras. She was also in Calcutta with spent some time with the Holy Mother, and to her credit, she had many mystic experiences. She was a very pure lady, and she knew several disciples of Sri Ramakrishna. So she was another saintly lady, around Swamiji. So, totally taking Waldo and this Miss Blaine, that's his sister Devamata, there are some 10 people, including Mrs. Boone, who would certain times come to New York, who were very close followers of Swamiji. Now others were admirers. They would come in the two rooms, parlor rooms. The audience would vary from 70 to 120. And Swamiji would sit in between the two rooms to talk to people in both the rooms. And there were, of course, doctors and lawyers. But one thing was certain, that the audience was attracted by two things: by the message of Swamiji, because certain aspects of the message were very new to them. And another thing was Swamiji himself, because the great teacher like Swamiji, they physically they represent their message also. You look at the man, you have some idea about what kind of man he was, you see. For example, you read in the Kathamrita that Sri Ramakrishna is telling about a certain devotee, that he sits and swings his body and his eyes are riveted on me. So if the whole mind has been attracted by me, what else do you need in spiritual life? Sri Ramakrishna saying like this. So if you are attracted by a great spiritual personality, then much of the message you get even by looking at him, because his power and his glory enters into your soul. So Swamiji's lectures were not simply narration of some philosophical ideas, elucidating some theological points. He was really distributing spirituality. See, that is, of course, a great teacher like him has to do it. So this is one thing about Swamiji. So, of course, in such a meeting, and the place being America, there used to be always a few who were after esoteric things. There are mystery mongers, and such people were also in his audience. Others, maybe a few, would come occasionally to see what kind of man he is, what is his message, and then fall out. But the most, a group was growing around him. And when he began also public lectures, because for a time he was concentrating upon the lectures in the parlor rooms in his the place where he was living, the two rooms. Now, when he began outside public lectures, then the audience further grew. Now we shall come to what was he teaching. So we have said that he was teaching the four yugas more completely and more in a detailed way. And there's something also in Swamiji, which is normal for a teacher also, that there is some magnetism about him. If you have some earnestness in you, you cannot escape it. There are some people, Sister Devamata writes, that once a man came to discuss certain things with Swamiji, he was so much overwhelmed that he had to take to his bed, for 3 days. That means he was swept up because many people have innate ideas about religion. For example, Swamiji would say that seeking heaven is a very low thing. Such thing, you see, they have never heard. For them, heaven was the highest thing, covetable. So, and then Swamiji's ideas that you should not pray to God for ordinary things. You should pray to God for big things. You should not pray to God that I have your stomach upset, please cure me, etc. You should pray for big things. These ideas were very new for them. And the fact that there are many ways to God, that these ways are, say, self-sufficient, though Swamiji himself would prefer a combination of all the faculties. In the Belur Math rules also he says that one who shows a lack of enthusiasm in any of the yogas, his or her character has not been pounded in the crucible of Ramakrishna. This is the language he is using. If you are a true follower of Ramakrishna, you should have some elements of all the four cardinal yogas. That was his ideal. Yet, he would admit that through each of the yogas, you can reach perfection. I know there was one Swami, his name is Vivekananda. He went to Benares and told Swami Turiyananda that the scholar, the Sanskrit scholar, Tarasar, who comes to Belur Math, he has said that by doing work you cannot say have salvation. Swami Turiyananda was walking with a stick. He stood still and held his stick high, saying that go back to Belur Math and tell Tarasar Pandit that since Swami Vivekananda has said that through Karma Yoga you can attain salvation, so it must be correct. Whatever your books are saying, it is of no importance to us. Even the Holy Mother said that Naren looked over the capacities and the tendencies of men and women, and he prescribed this Karma Yoga. Without this, she added, the heat that is below would rise to the head, which means the pressure of libido will overwhelm you. This was the language of the Holy Mother. He was like that. Swamiji prescribed say all these things, though in his opinion, as I have said, he used to say that this harmonious blending of all the faculties, that is the ideal of the modern age, and that is preferable for balanced growth in spiritual life. Then you say it was his influence was so great that Devamata writes that once his dog, an Irish setter, this dog would stand perfectly still and a quiver would run through his body whenever Swamiji would lay his hand on his head and tell him he was a true yogi. Even an animal felt the influence of Swamiji. The classes which he used to hold, time to time, the scripts were sent to England to study, so that study could, because study was working on this Naradiya Bhakti Sutra. So Swamiji used to say that you may get some helpful material from these talks. So he used to send them and study would publish them, those things. And this would create a problem later on between study and the Vedanta Society of New York, because Vedanta Society of New York owned the right to publish. So you see, this would create some problem, but Swamiji did this to help your study. For example, the second commandment says that you must not bow down to a representation of God. That is the second commandment among the 10 commandments there in the Abrahamic religions. But Swamiji, during the Bhakti Yoga, totally went in the other direction. He said it is absolutely necessary to worship God as man. And blessed are those races which have such a God-man to worship. Christians have such a God-man in Christ. Therefore, cling close to Christ. Never give up Christ. That is the natural way to see God in man. All our ideas of God are concentrated there. The great limitation Christians have is this, that they do not heed other manifestations of God besides Christ. He was a manifestation of God, so was Buddha, so were some others, and there will be hundreds of others. Do not limit God anywhere. Pay all the reverence that you think due to God, to Christ. That is the only worship we can have. God cannot be worshipped. He is the immanent being of the universe. It is only to his manifestations as man that we can pray. He boldly supported this worship of God-man, which is an anathema for the Orthodox Abrahamic scholar. Then for the mystery mongers, he would say, you must not mix up Christ or Buddha with hobgoblins flying through the air and all that sort of nonsense, sacrilege. Christ coming into a spiritualistic seance to dance. I have seen that pretense in this country. It is not in that way that these manifestations of God come. The very touch of one of them will be manifest upon a man. When Christ touches, the whole soul of man will change. For example, what happened to St. Paul, for example. Christ touched him and he had a son and he was a changed man. St. Paul. The great strength of Christ is not in his miracles or his healing. Any fool can do those things. Fools can heal others, devils can heal others. I have seen horrible demonical men do wonderful miracles. I have seen fools heal at a glance by the will the most horrible disease. These are powers truly, but often demoniacal powers. So in worshiping Christ, in praying to him, we must always remember what we are seeking, not those foolish things of miraculous display. So these things were new. There are millions of Christians who admire Christ because of his miracles. He's an uncommon person because of his miracles. And then those who are seeking heaven, to them he would say, such a heaven would not be much different from this earth. We have here some miseries and some happiness. We will just have a little less and a little more. There will be no more light than we have here. It will be the result of our good deeds, perhaps plenty to eat or perhaps very little. Perhaps we will have the power to fly like bats to the air, jump through walls and play all sorts of tricks, to dance in some seance room. To my mind, it is better to go to the nether regions than to run a spiritualistic camera. The Christian's idea of heaven is of a place of intensified sensual enjoyment. How can that be God? So with these things, you see, he was pounding some of these superstitions deeply ingrained in ordinary persons. After all, this desire to go to heaven is a desire after enjoyment. This has to be given up. It is too little, too vulgar a thing to go to heaven for you to think of. It is just the same as thinking I'll become a millionaire and a very powerful man. There are many of these heavens, but through them you cannot gain the right to enter the gates of religion and love. So here you have these things, you say, in the teachings of Swami Vivekananda. Then he was also having a dig at fanatics. He said that fanatics only make hatred in the world. Do you mean to say that these fanatics love these poor fellows who become drunkards? They're simply fanatics because they want to get something out of it. They have no sympathy. And as soon as you come out of the company of fanatics, you'll begin to love and to sympathize. And the more you get of this love and sympathy, less will be the power of cursing those poor fellows. So with all these things, he was destroying your inbuilt superstitions of the people. Regarding karma yoga, he is saying those whose whole soul is gone into the self, whose desires are confined in the self, who have ever become associated with the self, for them there is no work. That means karma yoga is okay because it is yoga through karma, but there is also a point when there is no karma. And Swami explains that no karma, it is easy to say no karma. Only those who have the experience of the self, so they can only go beyond karma. A sheep was passed over a mountain, a magnet, and all the bolts and bars were drawn out, and it went to pieces. It is in ignorance that all struggles remain, because we are all really atheists. Real theists can never work, by meaning that God is doing everything. Your agency goes away, sense of agency. When sense of agency goes away, you may seem to do work, but you are not working. Because always you think that your body and mind are the instruments in the hands of God. That's why Swamiji says this, that real theists can never work. We are all atheists, more or less. We do not see God, believe in Him. He is God for us and nothing more. There are moments when you think He is near, but then you fall down again. When you see Him, who struggles for whom? Help the Lord. There is a proverb in our language, shall we teach the architect of the universe how to build? Now help the Lord. This is another ingrained doctrine in Abrahamic religions, because you see, the theology goes like this. There is evil in the world, so God is good, so how can He be the cause of evil? So there is another thing outside of God. It is called the devil, the Satan. He is causing this evil. So the theology says that your God is in constant fight against the Satan or devil, and say the lovers of God should help God by. So when you kill a sinner, for example, you are helping God, because God wants that, and you are helping God. This is the kind of this idea of helping God in this way. So Swamiji is having a dig at that. Help the Lord, etc. So those are the highest of mankind who do not work. The next time you use these silly phrases of the world and how we must all help God do this and do that for Him, remember this. Do not think it. It is too selfish. All the work you do is subjective for your own benefit. God has not fallen into a ditch for you and me to help Him out by building a hospital or something of that sort. He allows you to work. He allows you to exercise in this great gymnasium, not to help Him, but to help yourself. Do you think even an ant will die for want of your help? Most arrant blasphemy. Do you think you can help the least thing in this universe? You cannot. You can only help yourself in this gymnasium of the Lord. He allows you to work. It is in order to help yourself. This is the attitude of work. If you work in this way, you will never be attached. Another, way, these are new things that you cannot help God. Because the ingrained theology is this: you must help God because God is in struggle against the Satan. This in question of Jnana Yoga, he's saying that the word Jnana means knowledge. It is derived from the root Jna, to know, the same word from which your English word to know is derived. Jnana Yoga is yoga by means of knowledge. What is the object of Jnana Yoga? Freedom. Freedom from what? Freedom from our imperfections, freedom from the misery of life. Why are you miserable? We are miserable because we are bound. What is this bondage? The bondage is of nature. Who is it that binds us? We ourselves. So with these things, the whole universe is bound by the laws of causation. So freedom is going beyond the laws of causation. That means, as Buddha said that the whole universe is a something is before you, and then before this time, and that produces this thing. So it is called Pratitya Samutpada. So which in other words, the law of causation. So everything is caused due to some other thing. This is the whole phenomenal existence. Pratitya Samutpada. There cannot be anything, any fact, either in the internal or in the external world, that is uncaused. And every cause must produce an effect. Now, this bondage in which we are is a fact. It need not be proved that we are in bondage. For instance, I'd be very glad to get out of this room through this wall, but I cannot. I'd be glad if I never became sick, but I cannot prevent it. I would be glad not to die, but I have to. I would be very glad to do millions of things that I cannot do. So I say, as the Upanishad says, Samane vrikshe purusha nimagna nishaya shochati muhyamana. Justam yada pashattanamisham asya mahimanam iti shokaha. That means the two birds are the same tree, you see. And the lower bird, due to anishaya means due to lack of control over things. So anishaya muhyati, so because he wants many things, but he has not the power to do it. So therefore, he is overwhelmed with grief. When he looks at the glory of the upper bird, who is serene, who is peaceful, Ishtam yada pashattannamisham asya mahiman, he saws his glory, iti shoga. Then he becomes bereft of sorrow. Misery begins with the birth of the child. Weak and helpless, he enters the world. The first sign of life is weeping. Now, how could he be the cause of misery when you find it at the very beginning? We have caused it in the past. See, as Swami Vivekananda says, Prana Shakshi Shur Krandan. That means the crying of a child is a sign that it is alive. So if it is like that, so how can you expect any happiness in this world? Because the child comes to this world and the crying of the child is the sign that it is alive. So as Buddha said that bhava is dukkha. The coming into being itself, is the beginning of suffering. So we have to, with the help of knowledge, we have to break. Knowledge means spiritual knowledge. We have to break this, and through knowledge we will know our real nature, that we are not mortal beings, that we are really the ocean of bliss, not just a drop of that ocean. We are the full ocean, each one of us. So that is Jnana Yoga. This is how we practice Jnana Yoga. The main cause is ignorance. Ignorance means spiritual ignorance. We do not know that we are spirit. We think that we are matter, we are body, perishable body, and which is holding a fragile mind inside it. That is our view of ourselves normally. We hear every day people say all around us, I dare to reason. It is, however, a very difficult thing to do. I would go 200 miles to look at the face of the man who dares to reason and follow reason. Because if you follow reason, then you must be extraordinarily brave. Idea is that to follow the Jnana Yoga, you must be not an ordinary person. You must be an extraordinarily brave person. Look at the Guru of Ramakrishna, the Kutapuri, who was a Jnani. To cling to his belief, he used to remain naked and a sannyasi. So these are the things. You see, it is not easy to do such thing. So reasoning is the reasoning is a real reason. If you follow your reason, you have to be tremendously bold. Otherwise, you have to go by the superstition of your culture, of your race, of your religion, etc. So I want to prepare you by telling that this method can only be followed by the boldest. Do not think that the man who believes in no church belongs to no sect, or the man who boasts of his unbelief is a rationalist. Not at all. In modern times, it is rather bravado to do anything like that. To be a rationalist requires more than unbelief. You must be able not only to reason, but also to follow the dictates of your reason. If reason tells you that this body is an illusion, are you ready to give it up? This is the question. So he gives a stern warning to people who think that by reading a little philosophy, etc., you can be a real jnani. You cannot. Do you have any question?
Swamiji, there are two questions which came from Mojtaba Darwish. The first one is, what is contaminated food? And the second one, how can we purify our food more?
There are, as we have discussed, there are three types of contamination. One is the ordinary contamination, which everyone understands. That some dust has fallen, say some impurities are there. So this is one kind of impurity. The second kind of impurity is the nature of the food is such that it will be pure. That means it will heighten your rajas or tamas and lower your sattvic nature, which is in details discussed in the Bhagavad Gita, the 3 types of food. And then there is other, you see, the 3rd type of impurity comes from the contamination of the person. Say, the person who prepares your food or who touches your food, thereby the food or drink is contaminated. You know, in the life of Sri Ramakrishna, he visited once the great philosopher Shashodhar Tarkachudamani. So he was in his house, and at a point Sri Ramakrishna said that he was thirsty. So a man among the audience, he got up and brought a glass of water and kept it on the table. Sri Ramakrishna was about to touch the glass, then his hand recoiled from it. He could not touch it. And the host remarked it. So he himself brought a glass of water, which Sri Ramakrishna took. Now, Naren, Vivekananda was in the audience that day. So after the meeting was over, Sri Ramakrishna requested Naren to come with him to Dakshineshwar. Naren refused. He said, no, I have some work in Calcutta. What is this work? Work was the investigation on this point. So he knew a person in the household, inquired from him about the nature of this man who brought the first glass of water. And he said that he has as many concubines as there are, you see, hairs on his head. That means he's a extremely womanizer. So then Naren understood why Sri Ramakrishna's hand recoiled from the glass. He has touched it, so the glass has, the water has become impure. This is very difficult to understand this kind of purity, because only the very great yogis can do it. That's why we say that Swami Vivekananda is saying that the food here is unclean. Can you prepare a little food for me? To Miss Waldo was for this, because Miss Waldo was a great spiritual seeker herself and very pure. And the second question was what?
How can we purify our food more?
How can we purify? By looking at these things. You say ordinary purity, everyone understands. Washing, you say applying vinegar, etc. You say all these things. And then if it is a little old food, not you say totally rotten, you can heat it up nicely, so that if any germs have been there, it will go away. That is too much. That is a food which is highly piquant, full of chilies, etc. A great amount. So all these things should be avoided, or a tremendous amount of animal food in great amounts, and that will increase your rajas. So that is the thing. And whenever it is possible, you should cook for yourself, so that contamination is not there, or otherwise have the food cooked by someone pure and of a religious nature, prayerful, etc. So these are the, otherwise what can you do?
There is another question from Chitra. She's asking, what did Swamiji say about Raja Yoga? Did he advise ordinary people to practice this approach?
You see, ordinary people means he taught all the yogas, but Raja Yoga is basically heightening of concentration. Heightening of concentration happens in anything, any yoga, but Raja Yoga takes it as, you say, directly, this path. That is heightening concentration. That is the goal of Raja Yoga. But Swamiji, though he mentioned what is called the occult powers in respect of Raja Yoga, he warned people that there are occult powers in it. And himself, for example, Sri Ramakrishna was offered to him, look here, I have these occult powers, but I cannot utilize them. You have to do many things in this world. Should I give these occult powers to you? Naren, is the pre-monastic name of Swami Vivekananda. Naren replied, will these occult powers help me to realize God? Sri Ramakrishna said, not at all. So he said that let me first realize God and then I shall decide. So he refused that way, and Sri Ramakrishna was pleased. So, because occult powers, ordinary person is full of ego. This ego itself is a great blockage. If for anything your ego increases, for example, you have a talent of good speaking, of good writing, or you are good at music, if you develop your ego because of your talent, then your talent is an obstacle to spiritual life. So
there is another question which came in
yes,
from Shantu. Shantu,
yes.
You would like to give it by yourself directly?
Sure. Swamiji, how can one cultivate desirelessness? Because Thakur says that nothing happens before the right time, and said that if you have a wound and that wound has healed and you rub the scab, it will reopen the wound. So how do we cultivate desirelessness without repression?
No, desirelessness is, the idea is that when you have got big desires, spiritual life is not for you. You have come to the dining table without having hunger. So Sri Ramakrishna used to tell these people that go and test the chutney of the hog plum. Go and test the, if you have disease, then come here. So this world is the chutney of the hog plum, because hog plum has no flesh. It is a stone with a skin, which is acidic, and you make a little chutney out of it. So there is not much substance in it, the hog plum. So taste the chutney of the hog plum, and if you have tremendous desire, spiritual life is not for you. You have to finish your desire, you see. Finish means attenuate. If you have tremendous desire to earn money, to have name and fame, etc. If you get in the struggle exhausted and you have developed a little detachment, then only you should turn to spiritual life. If you have great desires, you cannot, you have to first finish it.
Yes, Maharaj. Thank you.
Yes. So Sri Ramakrishna is to say that your small desires, you should finish it by enjoying. Big desires, you should tackle it by spiritual knowledge, spiritual practice, etc. Once I remember, it was in the early days of the monastery in Vellore Math. Mangoes were being served. Ripe mangoes were being served in the dining hall. So Surji Maharaj, Swami Vivekananda was among one of the persons who was seated there for food. And suddenly said, I would like to have a mango. He thought that there was not enough mangoes and it will be exhausted. And Swami Premananda heard it. So he immediately went inside, and on a plate, he cut many pieces of mangoes and held it before this Surya Maharaj, that please take it. And he was ashamed. He said, no, I have heard you saying this, so finish this desire by eating those things. They say, have this whole plate of mangoes. They say. So this was the teaching of the disciples of Ramakrishna, that small desires, if you like to have some sweetmeats, so go to the shop, try to buy it and finish it, so that the desire is attenuated.
So there is time for a last question.
Yes.
Swamiji explained that heaven is a sensual enjoyment. That's what you were telling.
Sensual enjoyment.
Yes, heaven.
Heaven is a sensual enjoyment, because why do you like heaven? What is the idea of heaven?
Yes. So now the question is, did Swamiji tell at that time also, what is the highest to achieve to the same audience who was thinking that heaven is the highest?
That means you should not say heaven, because heaven is not a very enjoyable thing. First of all, it will block your discernment. You may enjoy things, but it will block your spiritual progress. Because in this world, because there is misery, because there is suffering, man turns towards spirituality. As the Gita says, Anityam asukham lokam imam prapya bhayasya mam. You have got this world which is impermanent and which is full of misery. So having got this world, you pray to God. Anityam asukham lokam imam prapya bhayasya mam. If you do not have much misery, if you have, as Kathopanishad puts it, Sarge loke na bhayakincha nasti, natatrattanna jadaya bidheti, ubheti tva ashanaya pipase, shukati go modate sargaloke. That means in the heaven there is no fear, and you are not there. You miss death. Death is not there, and they have no thirst and no hunger, and they only enjoy and enjoy. This is the vision of heaven. So such a kind of heaven is, and many of us must have passed through these heavens. That is full of enjoyment, because if you have some good deeds, you are likely to go to heaven. So, but that is not a very preferable thing, because your ultimate progress is being blocked.